Good to see a lot of familiar names and faces.
I
It means
see
you haven't gotten tired of us yet.
see a few people's AI note takers. That's the
Yeah.
newest thing we see. Hi, Regina. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Tim and Clint. I've missed a lot of these, but I'm eager to hear what's going on today.
There you go.
All right. Yeah, I think today we're going to talk about the follow-up process. I feel like this is a good timing for this conversation because, Tim and you and I were on a call with the school recently where it came up. I was on right before that call, I was on another call with the school, and they were like, I'm staring at my pipeline. And yeah, I've got 10 tours scheduled, but I've got 90 people here that have just like they've been in the same spot of our funnel, they haven't moved, and how do we get them to move? And a lot of that just comes down to some what I call whether it's lead nurturing, follow-up sequences, things like that to get some of those families that might have stalled at some point in the process to nudge them along, if you will, and keep them moving forward. Well, I'm not sure how many more we're going to have on. Tim, we want to get rolling?
I think we certainly should. I think the bottom
Yeah.
line is that our fundamental message to anyone, whether you're in a Montessori school or a monastery school or anything in between, is it's all about relationships, and becoming perceived by the prospective family as people who are really approachable and kind, interested in them as a family, not pushy, not trying to convince them or hard sell them, but on the other hand, really showing interest and attention, and then developing a reputation as a credible source of knowledge. And then the whole question is, okay, we have a lot of knowledge. What do they want to know about? Do they want to know about our chemistry program? Or are they looking to believe that we would be great partners in helping them to raise nice kids in a crazy world? And I think the answer probably differs from school to school, but however you look at it, that's what all the influencers on the internet, the Instagram, the YouTube, the Facebook, whatever, that's how people create followers, by giving away content or responsive conversation that gives people the feeling that, wow, I am talking to someone who really knows what they're talking about, and they're really nice people and they care about me. And so follow-ups are essentially an automated way, because we were talking to a head of school yesterday who was saying, my director of admissions should be doing this. She doesn't have the time. And I don't have the time. And so there's nothing that beats us personally reaching out to someone who inquired about our school, who got into our customer relationship system, our CRM, whether it's Ames or HubSpot or whatever you're using. But how do we develop a relationship with them without coming across as canned and hollow? And I think that's what, when you talk about follow-ups, what you're talking about is how do you keep your school on their mind if they inquired, and how does this process look from the first time they respond to something to the day when they actually sign on the dotted line and they become part of your community.
And Tim, it's funny. This is more of a anecdotal story, but it speaks to that point about relationships and follow up. I was on a call, it was months ago, with a consultant who I actually used to work with at ISM, and he has his own business now. And we were talking about this concept, and what's working today, and when you go on site for a consult, just sharing war stories, if you will. And he was talking about this one school. That they weren't following up with anybody. And he was like, literally, we sat there for 2 or 3 days straight. And I sat with their admission director and we just called families, just called. And then I set up a sequence. He said he set up like a cadence for them that every week, just calling them, and don't call until or don't stop calling until you get a no. And now, easier said than done, right? Bandwidth, things like that. but the point remains that it works. And he's like, they increased their applications by like threefold just by doing that. And so the follow-up is just so important because let me share this. I may have shared this before. Let me share my screen. I think it's interesting data. Hold on. But I think it's good for us all to know. Oh no, did I lose my page? Hold on. Here it is. And I may have shared this before with you all, but nonetheless, it's good to see that what we're thinking right now, right? So as families are choosing schools, so this is the niche.com parent survey data. You may have seen this or you may have seen me present it before, but on the left-hand side, it's essentially how long it takes families to make really an enrollment decision. And on the right-hand side, it's the number of schools that families are considering. So let's start on the right-hand side. We can see here, what is it? 29, 41, 64% of families are considering 3 or more schools. And then close to 60% of families, if we add these up, are 6 months to 2+ years away from making a decision. So you have these two really interesting factors out there in the market, which is families looking at multiple schools and it's taking them a good amount of time to make a decision. So while we all want families today to see our ad, to attend the event, to schedule a tour, to fill out an inquiry form, it's not always that linear. Oh, here we go. We got a few more folks that have joined. It's not always that simple or linear of a path, if you will. A small percentage will, make that decision right away, but there's a good portion of families that it's not that they're saying no, they're just not saying right now. But what about a week from today, 6 weeks from today, 6 months from today? How do we keep them engaged? How do we keep them top of mind? How do we separate ourselves from the other schools that they're looking at? And how do we keep them, moving forward? So all of that speaks to exactly, Tim, what you had said, right? Which is then what is that content? What are those conversations that you're having that are really going to move the needle and influence someone's decision?
I think we also have to remember that depending on the school that we're running, the people we may be talking to may be more the student experience than the parent experience alone. So for example, Regina and Sandy, you work, as I recall, mostly with families that have very young children. And, there's a very different timeline and a very different mindset. They may approach you when their child is conceived or before birth, depending on your market. If you're in Toronto or in Oakland or in Washington, D.C., or just anywhere in the world where the perception is it's hard to get in, they may approach you a year or more in advance. But many times they show up when they suddenly realize, oh my God, my kid needs stimulation. My kid is driving me crazy, or my kid is, just bored out of his mind at home. And so either it's me or my kid. We've got to find a place for her to be. And what they're usually looking for is someone who they believe will keep the bathrooms clean, where it'll be kind, where a kid's not going to get beaten up by other kids, where no one's going to get abused. And they're looking for people to connect to who seem caring, thoughtful, responsible, loving, not going to make me feel guilty as a mother or father. Does that sound real? Probably a shorter timeline. So, I've seen people who come in and they want to know if they can start tomorrow. But we also see people who come and see us later. The other thing is, if you're running an independent school, like a Catholic school that starts at, say, 6th grade, you're probably going to need to impress the heck out of the kid, not just the parent, because the kid's going to have a lot of say in where we go to school. Now, not every kid gets much say, or not every kid cares. And a lot of parents would say, you don't get a vote in this. But we definitely want to organize our messaging and our verbal tours and our conversations in a situation like that, so the kid really feels seen and heard too. But again, what we're talking about today is from the moment they either go to your website and it said there's a button that says start the journey today, or call us to schedule a tour, or schedule a tour, whatever it is, begin the journey. So there could be something on your website, hopefully on every page. By the way, that's something many of us don't remember to do, including me. Or it could be an ad that you put on Facebook, or it could be your Facebook page or Instagram page, or it could be a Google ad. But somehow or another, they're going to click something that's going to lead them to a landing page. Right, Clint?
That's right.
What's going to happen at the landing page?
Well, hopefully a small percentage will take an action.
Well, I mean, what's on a landing page? Let's make it that simple.
It's why hopefully words, images, videos are going to get somebody to take an action.
So it's something that it looks like it's part of your website, even though it's
Sure.
not. And it's something that leads them, gives them a warm, fuzzy feeling about, maybe I'd like to take an action. And the key of a landing page is, this is not where we're telling them everything about Montessori or monastery or faith-based education, or, you could have our school by the numbers, but the real goal is a call to action, right? A CTA. And the call to action is usually something, maybe one thing, maybe a series of choices, right? So
yeah, I was going to pull up. Do you want me to pull up some example landing pages for those?
Sure.
Is anybody here not using landing pages, or not as familiar with a landing page? Either unmute, or you can type in a 2 if you're like, I'm not familiar with landing pages. Does anyone want to see that?
I don't see anything so far. People are having their lunch. Just bring up a landing page. I don't think we don't want to beat it up. I'm mostly trying, because today's topic is follow-ups, and because you and I know the follow-ups have two different forms. There's the Facebook ad follow-up, where we represent our ad to them visually for the next month, just like when you go to Amazon and you look at something, and the next thing you know, everywhere you look, that thing is being presented in front of you. That's called a follow-up. And it's a very, very powerful strategy. But there's another
Tim, can you
follow-up.
Can you allow sharing real quick?
Of course. I'm sorry. If that's right, I reclaimed host. There you go.
There we go. Yeah, so like here's Newgate's landing page, right? So people going to a dedicated page designed to get them to register for something, right? In your case with Newgate, group tours, learn about the global campus, talk with admissions, so we're getting them to fill out a form. So, when you do this, right, and you're using something like this where you're getting people to fill out these forms and connect with you, you're building this database. And like, for example, I was on a call with a school yesterday, and we looked at their pipeline, and they just had so many people that were in the what was it? Was it schedule a tour or interested in a tour? Something like that. They were at this one stage, and there was 90 families there. 10 of them were kind of active, moving along, but there were 90 that had just kind of stalled out, right? So it's, what do you do with them, right? There's a good chance that there's a lot of families in your database right now that could be, quote unquote, I like to use the term, reactivated. Maybe they're still looking, you never know. But so I think there's a part of this which is reactivating families that are in your database right now, but then also moving forward, making sure you have a system in place that keeps them active and keeps them engaged. Because if there's only 1 or 2 touch points and then that's it, I think we're potentially missing out on a large population of families that, again, when we go just back to the numbers, whatever tab this is, We know people are most are at least 6 months away. Yes, there's going to be 30 to 40% that will make a decision now, but there's a larger part of the population that they are 6 months or more away, and how do we keep them engaged? So um, I have some examples, Tim, but is there anything else you would want to go into before we start diving into examples?
No, I think you're doing fine.
Okay. So I like to think about follow up, staying in touch with families in two parts. One is the moment after they've already taken an action. How are we going to follow up with them? And then there's the second part of, let's say they don't take the immediate action. They request a call or they book a tour, but they don't formally inquire or they don't fill out an application. How do we stay in touch with them without feeling like we're following up with them every single week saying, hey, are you interested? Are you interested? Right? We want to get beyond that. And so I look at this in two parts. And so part one, let's see where it is. I'm losing track of all my tabs now. Hold on. Yeah, here we go. I like to use this as a good template for the initial follow-up sequence, which is, and I know this was an example if we use something like a lead magnet, which is a downloadable guide, but this concept I think applies whether you're booking tours, registering people for open houses, having them download a guide. I like to put in like a 3 to 5 part email sequence to keep them engaged, get them excited, so that let's say it's booking a tour, even between now that they filled out the form and maybe the tour is at the end of the week or the beginning of next week, giving them really good, helpful content that, like I said, keeps them engaged, and that can even help show up rates as well. So let's just use this example. You have your welcome email, which is a nice, warm, welcoming message. Email number two, you put examples in here. This is worth watching, which could be like a video looking inside the classroom, showing the classroom experience. Number three, I think we all have some sort of quick facts about the school. How many students you serve, how many extracurricular programs you have, all those numbers that, like you have the quick facts, right, about your school. I think having an email about those can be helpful. Um, email number four, what happens after your school, right? When they graduate, when they leave to go to middle school or high school or college, however far your school goes. And then email number five are testimonials, what parents have to say. Here's why families love us, maybe they're video, maybe they're written. But having a sequence like that, when somebody, let's say they register for an open house or book a tour or whatever it might be, um, helps differentiate, helps answer questions, helps give a really transparent view of, hey, maybe here's what the classroom looks like. But I think having that as kind of part one of a sequence to just keep people engaged after they've already shown intent and taken an action. Does anybody do this already? Anybody have like a really great follow-up sequence that they feel like has worked really well? And one of the other things I would say about this is this can complement personal outreach. This doesn't have to replace personal outreach, right? If like Tim, we were the head of school we were talking with yesterday, right? Part of their forms that they have people fill out, one of the questions is, when are you interested in enrolling? And it was like enrolling immediately within 6 months, 25, 26. I think they had another option, but there's a question there saying enroll immediately. If somebody says they fill out a form, a contact form that they want to enroll immediately, enrolling them in this sequence, it still makes sense. What we're looking at here, it's that this still applies to them. We can deliver that to them. But those families also deserve a phone call, right? They're saying I want to enroll immediately, pick up the phone. So I just want to be clear, because sometimes when we talk about automation and follow-up, sometimes we feel like this replaces the human interaction, which we don't want to have happen, because there are times where it is worth our time to pick up the phone and give them a call. And especially if somebody says they want to enroll today, being able to do that.
I will go further. I would suggest that there is no job for any of us as heads of schools or whatever position we have. It's everyone's job to do admissions, and there is no more important job than responding to inquiries into our school and doing it right away. So literally no answering machines, phone rings, you pick it up within 3 rings, and you are charming. Even if you're in the middle of a meeting, you simply say, let me call you back. I'm in a meeting right now. Are you available in about half an hour? I'll call you back. Promise. Really believe in that.
Yeah.
That's a good sequence, by the way, Clint.
Awesome. And then, so then there's kind of part 2 to this, which is they fill out a contact form. They're interested. You deliver these emails. Maybe you reach them, maybe you don't. There's going to be a good portion of your families that you just don't hear from them, right? The old, hey, we just got ghosted, right? That's the term, right? They disappeared on us. Where did they go? That doesn't mean that we want to stop following up with them. But now we just want to use our content. And this goes, Tim, back to your point, which is what is that content that we can keep delivering to them that's going to differentiate from competitors, that's going to um, answer questions that families might have, that's ultimately going to help maybe influence their decision-making process as they're looking at multiple schools. This actually goes back to, was anybody here? Was anybody here on this session where we did the big 5? The big 5 pieces of content? I lost my screen for the. Oh, where did my Zoom screen go?
Yes,
I'm trying to look at the chat and I can't find the chat. That's okay.
send me these pictures so I can add them to the YouTube as the little logo.
Hold on, let me scroll down here. We talked about the concept of the big 5, which is when you're going to create content, ideally it falls into one of these 5 big categories because these are the categories that mean the most to your families, which are, what do they want to know? They want to know cost. They want to, when I say problems, like address questions, objections, concerns they have going on in their head, comparisons. And so all of your content should fall into one of these categories. So as you're thinking about what should our follow-up content be, it can be one of these examples. And so I'll just scroll through very quickly. But we talked about, okay, maybe you write an email after the month of following up with them. How do you afford a private school education? And then email a week later after that. Navigating the college admissions during the pandemic, right? So that was one that was, everybody had questions about during the pandemic, right? Which was, we can't go visit schools. How do we navigate the college, process? So think about what are those questions that your families have that you feel like you're answering on every single tour, and that becomes your content. Comparisons, all boys versus co-ed, all girls versus co-ed, public versus private. The one that I like with my daughter's school, K-8 versus K-12, which one is better? So a lot of this all goes back to, if we want to get families to move to the next stage and they've stalled out, it's many times it could come down to, let's just answer the questions that might be going on in their mind. Maybe they have preconceived notions about the school. Maybe they have concerns that are unfounded, right? And we need to overcome those objections potentially. And that's where we can develop content like this. Best of lists. People love listicles. Put a number in front of any headline of an article and you'll immediately get more readership. So the 12 best Montessori toys that help your child learn through play, right? Content like that, which is really helpful. And then social proof. Teacher spotlights, alumni spotlights. It was interesting with ISM when I worked there, when we looked at all of our survey data and we looked at what are the top 5 reasons that families choose a school. 3 of the top 5 had to do with faculty. So if you're showing how great your faculty is, well, it was choose and stay at your school. 3 of the 5 had to do with faculty. And so if you could show how caring, loving, amazing your teachers are, that's going to go a long way as well. So this is a good foundation for thinking about ideas with, well, what should we put into our content? How do we follow up? And again, I want to reiterate that follow up in this case can be through email. It can also be through text. But I think if you're delivering this, typically through email, people still read email. I can guarantee you that if you send an email, 30 to 50% of your families will open that email. That's still a good chunk. And if it's helpful email, they're going to look to read it. Questions? Tim, anything I missed on or anything? What do you think? Dive deeper on
I
it?
think you're doing fine. I mean, I think what the key of what you're describing is your 5-step sequence of follow-ups that was on one of your other slides. I think that was really good. You had that initial email, you had a suggestion of maybe look at a video, this is worth watching. You then suggested, let's solve a problem like, how do you afford a private school, or social proof, testimonials from satisfied parents or kids. And the other thing you can do, especially if depending on what kind of school you're running, you may offer them something that you would think of as parent ed, and those address a problem that parents commonly have, which may or may not have to do with getting into a private school or affording your private school. It could be completely different, like how to get your kids to behave, whatever. Now, again, what I appreciate about tools like Ames or HubSpot or Infusionsoft or any of it is they're designed, as you're seeing, Clint's got one of his behind the scenes things there. You're seeing a flow chart of if this happens, then do that. And they're pretty simple. This is a very, very simple flow chart. And there are some tools that let you do all kinds of if-thens. If they do this questionnaire and they answer in this way on the survey, you do the following action. But what this is designed to do is to automate a process so that you don't have to be on your tippy toes every day doing everything correctly in real time. I still think you should be, ideally, because there is no better use of your time. But this does it for you, and it will do a pretty good job.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. It's like we want to use tools to do this. And again, our tool is not exclusive to doing this. I'm going to show it just to show you how you can automate this, because you want to automate these follow-ups. Doesn't replace human interaction, but we want to use tools, and the tools can come in really handy. And to your point, Tim, like this, I'll show you a very simple sequence. So for example, whether you use something like a HubSpot, a MailChimp, you use our platform, all of them are going to have a very similar setup with your automations, which is, okay, when I want to label somebody, I'll call them, we put them in the nurture sequence. So we're going to tag them as, okay, they haven't moved forward. We're going to put them into the nurture sequence. Then it's going to trigger this series of emails that once a week will go out. Email number 1 is just an FAQ email. Email number 2 is what the families are saying. Email number 3 is achieving academic excellence. And we can keep building this. And I think this is like a 30-some week email sequence that can go out that you can utilize. And we can do things like, if they do schedule a tour, let's say, or they do inquire, you can take them out of this email sequence if you want automatically. So they're only going to keep getting this until they take an action. But the other really cool thing is that sometimes when you think about automation, you think, well, are we losing the personal touch, things like that? And really, no. I mean, you really should be, automation should do 2 things, is stay in touch with people at the simplest form and through follow-up. But also, you can actually build better relationships by delivering personalized content. So for example, let's say you have a form and it's like, what's the number one thing you're most interested in school? Sports, small classrooms, theater, whatever it is, you have those options. We can do something like, if we'll just call this branch, we'll say the sports branch. And I don't know if I have the option in here, but it's like if oh yeah, my number one priority in school is, here we go, athletics. Okay, and then we can have another branch that says, let's see, priority. My number one priority in school is, and this is the last one I'll do. I'll save it some time. Um, Alternative to public schools. Okay, so let's just save that. So now we've created these branches. Now what you could do is when somebody fills out that form and they say, yeah, my number one priority in school is the athletics, or my number one priority is looking for an alternative to public school, you can deliver them customized content based upon what their interests are. In a simpler way, you can deliver them customized content based upon their grade level. If they're in early childhood, they're going to get different content than if they're looking at a high school. So you can use these follow-up systems, and on one end, there's a little bit of work in the beginning to set these up, but then once they're set up, you have a really great system in place to to keep families in your system, in your funnel, engaged throughout the entire process, whether they're the child was just born and they're looking for a school 2 years from now. If you're delivering them a year or two worth of content, who do you think they're going to think of when the time comes? And it might sound like a lot, but it's actually easier said than done, and not easier said than done. I think it's easier than people think to create all this content, especially now with ChatGPT. We didn't even get into that yet about how ChatGPT can help us do this.
Sure. There is a real belief out there that parents get annoyed if you communicate with them too much. And yet the single biggest thing that I see on the surveys that I do with schools around the country and the national surveys is my child's school does not communicate with me enough. I haven't got a clue what's going on. So it is true that parents don't want a bunch of junk email, but I would suggest to you that a lot of us tend to err on the side of not doing too much because we're afraid that we'll annoy the parent. It's very easy for a parent to be annoyed. All they have to do is have at the bottom of every email, would you like to see more or fewer of these?
Yeah.
Or unsubscribe, of course, but you don't want them to unsubscribe.
I've never heard of a family getting annoyed, or really anybody getting annoyed with the amount of emails, if the emails aren't if the emails are truly trying to add value. Meaning, if all your emails every single week were apply today, ready to apply today, it's just the same thing, sure, they probably will unsubscribe from that. But if your one email is about the best Montessori toys to have in your house, and then the next email is, the 5 books you need to read this summer, and the next one is like, that's just good, helpful content that parents are going to want. It's highly unlikely that they're going to unsubscribe. It's going to keep them at the top. It's thought leadership type content as well. Um, and yeah, and another way to think about this is the only thing, this is one of those marketing strategies that the only thing that can happen is something positive. You could only get more people to inquire, enroll. You're not going to get less. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So as you sit here today, you likely all have a database of families. You've got a chunk that are active and moving through the process. There's probably a good chunk in there that you haven't heard from in a while, and maybe they haven't heard from you in a while. So I think one of the best things to do is to try to re-engage, reactivate those families, and even start with them and saying, hey, we've got a new newsletter that we're going to be sending out every week. If you don't want to receive it, just hit unsubscribe at the bottom of this email. Otherwise, you can expect, in a couple of days, we're going to send out our first newsletter if you want to use your newsletter. And that's another way to do content as well. If you have a current family newsletter, just send that to your prospective families too. Maybe you want to take out a few things, but prospective families love to see what's going on at the school. So even if, that's a really nice, easy way to just send out the newsletter at the very least to families.
As an aside, some of you use Plod or Claude. I particularly like Plod. And I was at a school the other day and I was talking to the principal and I was just saying, talk to me about what you love about being here, whatever. She started talking about a particular kid and a situation. And I suggested, let me record this, tell me the story again. And then I dropped it into ChatGPT and said, take what she's saying here and turn it into a blog essay. And it just turned out brilliantly. You have to coach ChatGPT a little bit to get it to sound right, but it really is powerful and you can get it going so quickly.
What do you have any questions about before we move on? Any questions about creating follow-up systems? Does anybody have a system they currently use to do follow-up? Because if you don't, I would say that's probably your next course of action. We at Ames can certainly help you, but that's in order to do this follow-up, you definitely need a system to do it. I think that's probably step one. Then step two is really getting into the habit or developing a system to to create this content, to build this content out. That's actually something Tim and I were just talking about, especially for Montessori schools, is developing essentially like a library of content to utilize to deliver to prospective families.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is, again, people don't have time. They don't have time to learn and they don't have time to do. For example, one group of our friends runs a company called Nido Marketing. And if you're in Montessori, you probably heard of them. And they do a lot of things really well. And like Niche, which is another group, if you spend enough money, they'll do it for you. But what I know Nido was doing, at least for one level of service, was there was a library of content. Well, going from that library to having a school actually turn it into something actionable was something that the average school just didn't ever get around to doing. So figuring out a good way to solve it if you don't have the talent in-house. For example, Sandy, I happen to know you have a teenager who likes to do Instagram, and you're trying to get your teenage boy to get involved in the school the same way your parents got you involved, maybe doing some social media marketing for your school, right? It's a great example. Kids often know more than we do. But again, just think there's so many stories and situations that occur in a school every day, some of which we wouldn't want to share, but a lot of them are really positive. And if we figure out a way to, one, remember it, and then if all you do is go to ChatGPT and say, write me a story about a situation where I was watching and a kid said this, blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, you've got a pretty darn good start. Oh, by the way, I wouldn't ever suggest letting artificial intelligence just do it for you. I think it's nothing but a starter tool, but it can really, really be a powerful starter tool. It can speed you up a lot.
I was looking to see. I know that I have some email follow-up prompts for ChatGPT that are pretty good, that can get you pretty far along the way to building out a multi-week campaign that you add your personal touch to it, but if it gets you 90-95% of the way there, that can certainly save you a lot of time. But yeah, I based upon how many conversations I've had, especially recently and then over the years, I feel like this is that one that, whether it's time or whether it's, yeah, I know we should do it, or maybe we don't have the systems in place. I think this is one of those underutilized tactics, if you will, that can really move the needle when all you have to do is just set it up. Because like I said, only positive things can happen with a really strong follow-up system. And I'll give you a statistic. when we're running ad campaigns, and let's say it's for a downloadable guide, right? Go here, download this guide, and then after you download the guide, the goal is we want you to schedule a tour. Typically, what we find is for every 100 people who see the guide, usually about 20 or so will download it. But then from the follow-up system, or 20 or so people will download it, and then about a 10% of those will book a tour immediately. Right. So you'll get anywhere, 2 or so that now will book a tour, which is what you want. That leaves a significant amount of people that haven't booked a tour. When we've put follow-up systems in place, when you have a follow-up system in place, we've seen 15 to 20% more will book a tour within the next 2 weeks with the follow-up. So just thinking about that, if you don't have that follow-up system in place, you've missed out on 4 or 6 additional tours that you could have added from that one campaign without having some of these things in place. So that's why I think it's so important. That's why, it's a critical part of the Ames platform. That's why, especially when we're setting these up for schools, that we want to set these follow-up systems in place. So whether you use ours or thinking about using ours, or you don't have anything, you're looking at systems, I would highly recommend getting something in place if you don't have it already.
And as somebody who uses your software and tends to recommend it, I will just reiterate, since I don't own a piece of your company and you don't pay me a commission, one of the reasons why I personally recommend Ames is because, one, it's a lot more affordable than any of the other options that I've seen, including Hubly, which I've used and I like, and Nido Marketing, which I've used and I've liked, and Montessori Agency, which I've seen. I haven't used it, but I like a lot of them out there. Yours is a lot more affordable, and you're young and hungry. And frankly, I appreciate that because, I like taking advantage of someone who has got the energy and the desire to have a successful independent company to really help schools. And I think it's pretty good.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Tim. Any questions, everybody? Or is there anything you want to see or go through, or our time? We have 15 more minutes. We can wrap up early or hang tight and go through. Is anybody have any questions or anything? Like I said, they want to see anything when it comes to how to set these up or what type of content to utilize.
I don't see anyone jumping in. I want to make sure that everyone online or everyone watching this recorded really also understands the concept of Facebook follow-up. Clint, if someone was doing that kind of follow-up, where does Facebook and Google and Facebook follow-up fit in? Because we're talking about follow-ups, but the follow-ups we've been mostly talking about are programmed emails or texts or steps. In other words, you could have your system say, Regina, Sandy, would you make a phone call to this parent at this number today? I mean, you can do all kinds of things with this sort of programming of the action from the time someone first contacts you. But what is Facebook follow-ups?
And are you referring more to like retargeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great point as well, which is, when you think about advertising, there are 2 audiences. There's an audience that whether they don't know you exist or they're just not as familiar with you, we'll call that a cold audience, which we do want to advertise to them because we want to create more awareness, more eyeballs, right? Spread the word. And then there's a warmer audience. Those are families that they know who you are, they've been on your website, they've engaged with your Facebook posts. And what we want to do, and this actually does come into play when you think about holistically, I think HubSpot had this data point, which is, does anybody know what the number is of how many touch points it takes to get somebody to take an action with you? Let's take a guess at the number. And by the way, there's an old tried and true number and there's a new number. So we'll accept any one of those numbers as a correct answer.
6.
There we go. That was the old number. 5 to 7 was in there. Do you think the new number is higher or lower?
Probably higher.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, HubSpot came out and said 11, at least 11 touch points, because when that 5 to 7 number came out, I think that originated from, geez, I don't know, 70s, 80s. Like it was like an older like marketing book, and it held true for a very long time until what? Until social media, right? Now bless you. Now we're distracted by a million different things. We've got all the apps. We've got. I think the number was in a given week or something like that, you would see 5,000 advertisements. Now you see 5,000 advertisements in a day. There's some ridiculous stat like that. All of that pointing to the fact that we need multiple touch points to get families to take an action. So, for example, them seeing your website, that's a touch point. Your emails that you send to them is a touch point. And then what we know is we need more touch points, how do we get them to come back? That's where retargeting comes in. I might have a slide on retargeting, but the concept is this. You can run ads to people that have been on your website in the past 30 days, in the past 60 days, 90 days. They visited your tuition page, they visited your admissions page. So having retargeting ads set up and getting people to come back to you is extremely, extremely important, and a very effective style campaign as well. So we always highly recommend having retargeting campaigns set up so that you could say anybody who hits our site today, 30 days ago, we're going to deliver ads for them to keep them again top of mind. Did that answer? Oh, Tim, you're on mute.
Sorry. And the ones that I've normally seen, I'm either on Amazon, because Amazon's really good at this. They retarget you endlessly. So if you ever look at something on the right side of your screen, you'll see it again and again and again until they decide they're clearly not interested in buying it again. Or on Facebook, it'll show up on the right side of your screen typically, and that is something that's really interesting for Facebook. And at least in my own world, I was shocked the first time I saw it, where I went on our school's website, and the next thing I knew, the ads were appearing all over the place, and that is retargeting.
Yeah, it's a really great advertising strategy. I think it's one of those that gets probably overlooked too much. We always want to go out and find new families, and that's good as well. But and I will say, Facebook's actually done a really good job recently, where on one end they're taking over more control of the advertising these days. They're essentially telling people now, look, we know who you want, we'll advertise, we'll get it done for you. That's kind of what Facebook is saying these days. It used to be where you had to really put in these manual audiences that you wanted to target. Now we can use AI and things like that. That's what our platform uses, is AI. So it actually does retargeting for you automatically. You don't even necessarily have to set it up. So our ads will just automatically go to a retargeting audience. But yeah. So that's why we like to talk about omni-channel, omnipresence, meaning how can we be everywhere all at once? Well, if you run some Facebook ads and Google ads, you could be in social media, you could be in the search engines, you could be on weather.com or ESPN with a display ad, and then you can be in their inbox with your email. And so you can be in all these different places, so they can't help but remember you and come back to you.
One more thought. I want to remind you all that last week our topic was how to get social affirmations. In other words, how to get people to recommend you on various sites. And it's something that we all need to work on. I go to a lot of school websites, and they might on a particular website have 2 or 3 reviews and all they need is 1 bad review, and then they look like they're terrible. Or the reviews are very, very old. So you really want to work on getting people who like your school to say really nice things about it. And you know, I have not used this feature yet of Ames, but I know that Clint, you've got it built into the Ames software of getting people to do referrals.
Yeah, and I was actually on a call with school yesterday where we're getting set up to do review requests because they want to get more reviews. They want to build their Google profile, which is a ranking factor for the search engines. So yeah, running review campaigns. Hey, that's another one of those touch points as well. Checking out your reviews. So being able to have a really good system in place for getting more reviews. Yeah, it's key, and yeah, we'll hopefully be talking about that more next week as well.
Sure. Well, I think this is a good week. Any last words from anyone? Sandy, Lashmi, Regina?
No,
Christina?
just thank you. A lot of food for thought. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Well, thanks for joining us, everybody.
All right.
We will see you next week.
Thank
Bye,
you so
everybody.
much.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.